Big Ten, big mistake. Mark Rogers TV on Big Ten expansion with the conference announcing today the addition of Maryland and on Tuesday, Rutgers. When we talk conference expansion and realignment, we're talking about a number of factors, starting with football. Football is king, especially in the SEC and the Big Ten, but football king just about everywhere. Basketball is also a factor, along with money, of course, and academics. In the Big Ten, academics are important, and from what we understand, Rutgers and Maryland fit the Big Ten mold, but we'll leave that argument to other pundits. We move on to basketball, where Maryland has a rich tradition, usually competes on the national level, not to the level of Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, UCLA, but on that second or third rung, winning a national championship in 2002, but certainly the program has slid near the end of the Gary Williams era, and Maryland basketball has not been a factor in the last 5 or 6 years nationally, but certainly the potential is there. So Maryland basketball, a good get for the Big Ten. Rutgers has never won anything, has never been a factor. If Rutgers can now, with a Big Ten affiliation, recruit New York City, maybe they're a sleeping giant, but that has yet to be seen. That's the basketball situation. The Big Ten on par with the ACC, not traditionally over the long haul, but certainly right now and in recent past. So the Big Ten gets a good addition with Maryland and a questionable one with Rutgers. This move was certainly not moved by football. It was moved by money, and the Big Ten and the Big Ten Network in particular getting into the markets of New York City, Baltimore, and D.C., the Beltway. Now, Rutgers football and Rutgers basketball, and certainly Maryland football, not a big draw in any of those areas. We're not talking about other parts of the country where, for example, in other Big Ten situations where Wisconsin football is huge in Milwaukee and in Madison, Wisconsin. Minnesota football even big to a certain extent in Minneapolis. Detroit draws, of course, with Michigan State and Michigan. And Ohio State's got the big markets right there with Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. Not so much with Maryland drawing in D.C. and Baltimore and Rutgers in New York City. They don't care right now. They generally don't care. Is the Big Ten affiliation going to change that? I think that's a huge question mark. But the Big Ten and the Big Ten Network in particular is banking on the money aspect of this. They can argue that geographically it makes sense because Maryland and New Jersey are both contiguous states with Pennsylvania, so the Big Ten has made a big talking point of that. But again, this move is about money because it's certainly not about football. Maryland football is a mess right now. 2-10 last season. Randy Edsall has not been able to give them a spark and return this program to any kind of prominence. Now, Maryland football has never been misconstrued to be Clemson or Georgia Tech or of that level. They have been in the past, in the 70s, the 80s, and into the 90s. Ralph Friedgen certainly had some nice seasons, but Maryland at its best is probably going to be a 7 or 8 win football program and will give the Big Ten another, at its best, another Iowa, probably Iowa would be the best example of what Maryland could possibly be consistently, but Maryland's not there right now. And certainly Rutgers is having a great season, has only lost 1 football game. Greg Schiano left this program in great shape, and Rutgers football is strong right now at the Big East level. But we know that the Big Ten's goal is to compete with the SEC. And I would argue up until about 3 or 4 years ago that the Big Ten, if you look at the bowl results and the competition on the field, was competing with the SEC. Now the Big Ten has slid way back. Geographics working against the Big Ten right now. People are moving south and they're moving west. And along with that, football talent's going in that direction. So the Big Ten has to continue to lock down, or has to lock down, the Midwest, and now start to pluck those players from New Jersey and into Maryland. Now, for Maryland recruiting, they're going to have to be a major factor in the Carolinas, in Virginia, and of course in Maryland. But they're stealing recruits, if they do so, from Penn State. So I don't know where that helps the Big Ten. Rutgers is going to have to lock down New Jersey in the Northeast, but the recruiting ground there is not what the Big Ten wants. There are recruits in New Jersey and New York, but not the rest of the Northeast, not at the level of the Big Ten. If you had a chance to look at Sports Illustrated this week, give it a look because there was a Ohio State article, but it specifically also talked about Ohio State needing to lead a Big Ten resurgence, and that Urban Meyer and Ohio State would have to do it, but they need help from the rest of the conference. And I don't know if it's going to happen from Maryland and Rutgers. Right now, this is not a football move. It's a money move to get into New York City, Baltimore, and D.C. and bank on that equaling money and ultimately recruits and an upgrade. But this does not upgrade the Big Ten in terms of football play by any stretch. The Big Ten missed it in not being able to lure Notre Dame, and we were even talking at the time about this being a 7 or 8 win Notre Dame program, not a team that's vying for a national championship. But Notre Dame is Notre Dame, and they're right there in Indiana, and it all made sense for them to join the Big Ten. But it did not happen and will not happen. Nebraska football was a great get. Missouri should have been the target. Missouri at one point wanted to join the Big Ten. The Big Ten didn't make its move. It felt comfortable with Nebraska. The Big Ten was the first conference to start all this, but it shouldn't have stopped with Nebraska. Now the SEC has moved in, and the Pac-12 and other conferences, and the Big Ten has been left to pick over the leftovers, and that would include Maryland and Rutgers. We need to hear from you on this topic. Big Ten expansion, Maryland, Rutgers, and anything else you want to talk about in regards to conference expansion and realignment across the country on Mark Rogers TV.